Well, hey biology, hope you're doing well. When you watch this video, we're going through 6.4 carbon compounds. So here are some of the objectives. We're wanting to describe the qualities of carbon, and we also want to describe the functions of each of the 4 groups of macromolecules. Okay, so that's where we're going. Some essential questions for this unit, this section is: what is the role of carbon? What are the 4 major families of biological molecules, and what are the functions of each group of biological macromolecules? So hopefully by the end of this video we'll be able to answer those together. So chemistry, carbon, we're carbon-based life forms. Carbon is a very unique atom where it has 4 valence electrons. Valence means on the outside. So it's able to bond over and over again to many different things. It can form strong covalent bonds with many other elements: hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and nitrogen. Okay, living things are made up of carbon. So remember, the elements that make up the majority of life are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Okay, so carbon, like I said, carbon looks a lot of different ways. It can bind, triple bond, double bond, forming rings, bind itself over and over again. We'll see some of those examples as we move on. So 4 unique properties of carbon, allowing it to be kind of the building block of life, is it has those 4 valence electrons, which allows it to bond in many unique ways. It can bind to itself, and there's millions, because of this, there's millions and millions and millions of possible combinations. Millions. So like we talked about before, but if you were to eat an Egg McMuffin or make your own sandwich, I'm not sure if y'all like McDonald's or not. I try to stay away from fast food as much as possible, but you can see that there's 4 macromolecules. You would eat the carbs in the bread, you'd have the protein and the lipids in the egg and the cheese and the ham, especially if there's butter on the toast. And then, of course, every living thing also has DNA in it. So you would eat trace amounts of DNA, but especially you eat DNA, nucleic acids, when you eat raw food. And so macromolecules are built, like, I love Legos. I love building Legos with my little girl. It's amazing to me. And so they're literally built from these little, pieces called monomers. So like if you're building a Lego set and you have all these monomers together, through the process of polymerization, you start building polymers, okay? So these polymers are these larger molecules, biomolecules, that we build from smaller molecules. And so monomers, again, are the smaller units, and polymers are these larger units. So we have 4 macromolecules. We have carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Polymers are molecules made from repeating units of identical or nearly identical compounds called monomers, okay? Monomers. So we need to go through each of these, understand what they look like, and understand what they do on a cellular level. So let's go through the first one, sugar. Carbohydrates, good old sugar. Sugar, table sugar, sucrose, right here is a disaccharide put together with glucose and fructose. Condensation reaction. And so I would definitely recommend this video, How Sugar Affects the Brain, a TED Ed video. It's an amazing video. Sugar in some ways acts a little bit like a drug, which is crazy. So carbohydrates are made in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We use them as our main source of energy. I don't know if you've ever carb loaded before a highly competitive match or game or anything like that. I ate a lot of pasta to get some really quick energy to use. But yes, we use it as our main source of energy. But not only that, plants and some animals also use it for structural purposes. So you can see, for example, here, if I can change the screen, we store it in starch. We meaning like life on the planet, the Earth. So molecules are stored together, such as glucose, are bound together over and over again to form starch, which of course we eat as humans, and plants store as excess fuel. We also need to understand the difference between monosaccharides and disaccharides. Mono means 1, so it's 1 sugar. Di means 2. Saccharide means sugar. So lactose is an example of a disaccharide. Some of you may know people, you might even be yourself lactose intolerant. And so this is what happens. When they're missing an enzyme, here's that enzyme right there. Lactase, ASE means enzyme. And so lactose gets inside of the colon, small intestine, large intestine, and it doesn't break down like it should. And so because of that, the bacteria actually eat it up, ferment it, and that causes lots of irritation, increased motility, lots of problems that we don't have to get into the details of, but it's no fun. So complex carbohydrates, such as starch, are large macromolecules. One of the carbohydrates that we as humans make, and also other animals, from a biological standpoint, is glycogen. Glycogen, we store excess sugar in the form of glycogen. Why? Because if we go without eating, remember, we're maintaining a stable internal environment. Try to think about what that means right now, but that is homeostasis. And so glycogen can be converted into glucose, and excess glucose can be converted into glycogen. So we don't want to waste energy. We store it for future use, just in case maybe we have to go a long time without food. The body is designed by God to survive. Okay? So moving on, this is an example of glycogen. You can see how it's just glucose over and over and over again, branched. Plants stored as starch. And so you can see here that they store excess sugar as starch. Plants also use something called cellulose. That's a type of sugar. OSE is cellulose, so strength and rigidity, cellulose right there. And so we can see that carbohydrates have many different uses. The next macromolecule are lipids. Lipids are made from mostly carbon and hydrogen. And they are not soluble in water. They're hydrophobic. So fats, oils, waxes, all of those are lipids. Why are lipids important? Well, first off, they're important because they make membranes. Without membranes, cells are unable to maintain homeostasis, and therefore life would not exist. The appearance of a membrane is very important in the realm of life. And God, of course, knew how to create, of course, and maintain all these intricate complexities of life. And so maintaining homeostasis is one of the things that he has designed. And so waterproof coverings, lipids also, of course, using to store energy is very important as well. And finally, steroids, testosterone, estrogen, many steroids and some hormones serve as chemical messengers, so we regulate cellular processes, but steroids also are made, are lipids as well. And so there's different types of lipids. Our, nacho cheese versus avocado, both of these are fats. Both of these are lipids, but they're not exactly the same. And so there's something called saturated fats and something called unsaturated fats. So saturated fats don't really have many double bonds. They're just carbon and hydrogens over and over and over again. And this directly affects your health. Unsaturated is healthy. Like the avocado is super healthy for you. Healthy for your brain, healthy for your body. Fat is healthy for you. You have to eat fat. And so that is an example of, why lipids are important as far as a nutritional standpoint. So lipids also are built, from fatty acid chains. And so saturated versus unsaturated and all sorts of stuff like that. And so lipids whose fatty acids contain more than one double bond are considered to be polyunsaturated, which are healthier for you. And so and the next macromolecule, good old DNA. I don't know if you've heard of this company, 23andMe, but you can do a genetic test to kind of figure out your heritage and various things if you have, various, I think they do some disorders or, possible dispositions to disease and stuff like that. But this is called a karyotype. And so what they do is they kind of map the chromosomes, and all this is DNA. They do this when a cell is replicating. And so right here, there's two X's. Oh man, that was a horrible drawing. There's two X's, so you can see here that this is a karyotype of a female. XX is a girl, XY is a boy. And so we have 23 pairs. And so DNA is a type of nucleic acid. So nucleic acids contain nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, but they're built from nucleotides, okay? And so nucleic acids are extremely important in the sense that they store and transmit genetic information. Of course, half your DNA came from your mom, half your DNA came from your dad. Not exact copies due to meiosis, which we'll talk about later, but nonetheless, nucleic acids store and transmit this information. And so what is the monomer of a nucleic acid? Well, it's a nucleotide. So you have your nitrogenous base, and you have your sugar, and you have your phosphate group. And so over and over and over again, these are put together to build DNA or nucleic acid, DNA or an RNA. Another example of nucleic acid that's extremely important is ATP. ATP is chemical energy. we transfer the energy in food into ATP energy in the process of cellular respiration. So ATP, when a cell wants to do something that requires energy, that's like its money source. ATP is the money source where cells use. And so there's two different types of nucleic acids. There's ribonucleic acid and deoxyribonucleic acid. The names come from different sugars. Ribose is in RNA, deoxyribose is in DNA. And so here is a picture here of some of the examples of the differences in DNA and RNA. So you can see the sugar differences right here, sugar and sugar. But also there's base differences. This is the nitrogenous base on nucleotide. One of them is thymine. A binds to T, C binds to G in DNA. But the other one in RNA is uracil. So A binds to U in uracil. So this is just a different base. And then the only other difference right now that you should know about is that DNA is double-stranded. It runs like a highway in one direction, the opposite going in the other direction. But RNA is single-stranded. So again, horrible drawing, but RNA is single-stranded. It is just one side. It can fold back on itself, but it is just one side. And then finally, probably the ultimate macromolecule. If you had to pick one, of course, everything starts with DNA, and you can't live without any single one. But proteins are just such a diverse, crazy group of macromolecules. They contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but they also contain nitrogen. Some of them contain various other things, but they're made from amino acids. So what do they do? Here's a very important little paragraph that you should know. They control the rate of reactions, so they're enzymes. They regulate cell processes, so they're involved with signaling and altering, DNA expression. They form cellular structures such as membrane-bound protein channels that allow, water to come in or various other things to come in, like transporting substances. They also help fight disease. The entire world is talking about antibodies, right? Well, an antibody is an example of a protein. And so proteins do so many different things for a cell. And so they're built from amino acids. So you don't have to know exactly what amino acid looks like, but I would just know the general structure, which is right here. So this is the general structure, and the only thing that differs is this R side chain. This R chain is the only thing that differs between the 20 or so different amino acids that we need to eat in our diet. And so based upon these side chains determines how the amino acids interacts as far as bonding goes. And so covalent bonds join these amino acids together in something called a peptide bond, and those are the monomers. So a protein is built from amino acids being put together over and over and over and over again. And some of the proteins are very big and some of them are very small. And so more than 20 different amino acids are found in nature. So this is, again, one of the most diverse groups. So in this course, I often encourage you to think like, why does this matter? Why do we need to understand this? Well, an example is cystic fibrosis. And so this is a genetic mutation, many different mutations here, but this is an example. I actually knew a lady who had cystic fibrosis, and such a humbling story. Her goal was to see her son graduate at my previous school, and she did. And it's just a really touching story. But this is an example of a protein that's not working correctly. So you can see the protein here, and due to a genetic mutation, and there's I believe thousands of different genetic mutations that affect this protein, but there's one example mutation where something's been deleted. And so because of that, the protein looks different and therefore it behaves differently. And so it no longer lets these chloride ions out. This causes a thick, sticky mucus to build up, and this mucus causes multiple infections, multiple issues. They have to wear like shaker vests, and they have to take all these medicines, people suffering with cystic fibrosis. And so this matters. Proteins have to be formed correctly from the code in DNA. They have to fold correctly to do their job. And so if they're missing certain amino acids, they don't do their job. Another example we'll talk about down the road is sickle cell. Sickle cell is a mutation just in one place. So because of this, I would like for you to know the 4 levels of structure of proteins. So there's 4 levels. There's primary, secondary, tertiary. Let's try that again. I'm trying to write with a mouth. Primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Okay, and so that's a 4. And so the primary structure is just amino acids. Which amino acids are put in the order. And the secondary involves folding due to hydrogen bonding. The tertiary structure is the complete 3D. So this is when it completely folds into a 3D. And then if you have multiple tertiary structures, so more than one chain, multiple tertiary structures like put together, that is a fourth level of structure called quaternary. And so, for example, you can see here that this is an example of a quaternary structure. You have multiple tertiary structures, and then multiple tertiary structures bound together as a quaternary structure. So you have primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary, okay? So those are the four macromolecules of life and the importance of them, and also the importance of carbon. So this is section 6.4. Again, I hope this was helpful. I hope you are doing well. God bless.